Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at our virtual community meeting for February. Very excited, very honored about this meeting and our speaker today. As you'll see throughout this meeting and through the panel, through the Q&A session, you'll hear all of the accomplishments that Supervisor Holly Mitchell has accomplished, but also just the ongoing, long-standing commitment that she's always had to homelessness, housing, small businesses, affected communities, and really just inspiring organizations like ours, including ours, for many years in the past and many years to come. Thank you to our audience and our team members in general. We are excited to communicate that although we are far from out of being in the, coming out of the woods, we are trending in the right direction out in our properties and our portfolios, which affects our employees out in the field and our residents. So, the last quarter of last year heading into January was a very tough situation. So we're very grateful, leadership and the board's very grateful for those of you that have been out in the field, working through all of the complications and nuances, making sure that everyone has been safe and healthy as often as possible through our quarantines and COVID impact. And for the first time in many months, we're trending down as it relates to affected communities and properties. So thank you to all of you in the field for doing that. Very much appreciated. Very honored to be your team member. We're going to transition in just a second to video, but I did want to take this time to just introduce our esteemed guest and speaker. On November 3rd of last year, which is a very tough year, Supervisor Holly Mitchell was elected to serve the 2nd District of Los Angeles County. Throughout her career in public service, Supervisor Mitchell has always worked with the understanding that creating a California where all residents can thrive means investing in the communities, small businesses, families, and children of LA County. Having authored and passed over 90 laws in the California legislature, Supervisor Mitchell brings an extensive public policy record to the Board of Supervisors. Many of her bills have been at the forefront of expanding healthcare access, addressing systemic racism, and championing criminal justice reform. During her tenure in the California State Legislature, Supervisor Mitchell represented the 54th District for 3 years as an assembly member and later served 7 years as state senator for the 30th District. As state senator, she also held the distinction of being the first African American to serve as chair of the Senate Budget and Fiscal Review Committee. Prior to serving in elected office, Supervisor Mitchell was CEO of Crystal Stairs, California's largest nonprofit dedicated to child and family development. Before leading Crystal Chairs, she gained formidable experience in crafting public policy, both as former Senate District Field Representative and legislative advocate at the Western Center for Law and Poverty. With that, we're going to transition to video and say thank you very much to Holly Mitchell for everything that she's done for us. I want to say thank you to you not only for this moment, extending the time that you've provided to us for a virtual community meeting. We're very excited, very honored, to do that, but also just thanking you for all the moments you've had to thread together to get to the point where you are, and all the moments that are coming up, because all those moments put together creates an extraordinary impact. And I know a lot of people know that. I know a lot of organizations know that. I know a lot of residents know that, but we know it firsthand. Like, we know that we can't be us without you and people like you. So thank you for all of that. So getting into the Q&A session, you were recently selected as supervisor to serve the 2nd District of LA. Your seat on the Board of Supervisors marks the first time in history all 5 selected seats are held by women. So congratulations honored, extraordinary time. So with that, what are some of the policy and reform priorities you plan to focus on this term that you'd like to share with our audience?
So first of all, Lee, thank you so much for that very generous introduction and your comments about threading the moments together. That's powerful. I'm gonna have to give that some thought. But you're right. I think when we think about our lives, your professional life, your personal life, it is the compilation of life experiences. It was me weaving together the compilation of life experiences that really kind of frankly gave me the courage to step out there and say I was going to run.
Oh.
I think particularly as women, I'll just put it out there, and it's backed by research from the Center for the American Women in Politics at Rutgers, that women find themselves and take a different path to elected office. We tend to have to be asked. We have to be asked repeatedly. And even then, we don't always acknowledge the profound value of our ordinary life experience as women, and the role and how powerful that is in the policymaking arena. And it's that lens that I have of running Crystal Stairs and supporting low-income working families who wanted nothing better, but who wanted nothing more than any of us want, but to create a better opportunity, a set of Crystal Stairs for their children.
Yeah.
Working for the California Black Women's Health Project in our effort to try to bring empower Black women to be advocates for themselves in the health care arena, to bring equity in the delivery of healthcare services for Black women. It's all of that I brought to the table, and that's always been what shaped my policy agenda and my priorities. I made the decision to run for local office because of the 10 years of experience I had setting policy at the statewide 10,000-foot level. What an amazing opportunity, unique opportunity to now be at the local level of government, the level of government that truly is the safety net.
Yeah.
Given the fact that that's where I focused all of my policy energy, and is a real reflection of my own personal work history. And so the same issues that I champion at the state level is what I intend to do at the county level, to look at right sizing our criminal and juvenile justice system. I'm so proud of the work, the progressive work the county has done in the last several years around making a decision not to rebuild a men's county jail, to make a decision to indeed transform our juvenile justice system. So I feel like I'm coming in right at the precisely right time to really be able to operationalize those policies. The passage of Measure J. My career has really focused on poverty alleviation. That's the crux of what brings me to the work I've always done, and the work I've done as an elected official. And so looking at issues of housing development, affordable housing, how to meaningfully and in a relevant way provide supports to our unhoused, to look at the provision of mental health services, and now, thanks to COVID and our new shared collective experience countywide, making sure our recovery goes above and beyond the life experience of many of my constituents before any of us really knew what COVID-19 was. And so to have a new platform and a new opportunity to talk about equity and access to resources, equity and access to housing, equity and access to services in a profound way. I'm looking forward to the opportunity.
Yeah, I think one of the observations that a lot of when people heard that you're going to be speaking at a virtual community meeting, they were so excited, and so many questions, so many rolled up, and it was all around like influence and leadership and impact and seizing a moment, and having the courage to step into a moment when it's presented to you versus like, okay, this is my moment, what do I do? And one of the themes, one of the questions that came out was, you mentioned you were the CEO of Crystal Stairs, so you were a leader, right? You've been leading policy, you've been leading impact, you've been leading thoughts, like very, very much so a thought leader. But leading an organization and being a leader in politics, it doesn't necessarily equate. And not that many people have jumped the fence either way, politics to business, business to politics. And you have. And that's of special interest. I think it's of special interest specifically to women or men and women that are like, well, I want to be of service. I want to take this experience that I have and serve and give back. And one of the questions was like, two parts of the question is what inspired you to do that transition, and then how were you successful at it? So what?
Those are great questions and important questions, and I appreciate you making the distinction. First of all, what inspired me? I got pissed. I wish it was a more elegant reason, but it's not. I was sitting as the CEO of Crystal Stairs in a budget subcommittee hearing in the assembly. We'd gone up, organized community voices, took parents. I'm placing calls to parents, employers, explaining why the employer should give them a day off from work paid, hopefully, so we could put them on buses to Sacramento for Stand for Children Day to defend subsidized childcare. Because without childcare support, they couldn't go to work. The legislature was considering cutting $1 billion out of the subsidized child care budget, and they ultimately did. And I was sitting in the hearing room. We had done trainings. We had done weekend trainings so people understood. We had people put budgets together. This is my salary. This is my rent for my 2-bedroom apartment. This is my child care budget. Without the subsidy, you see where it leaves me. We'd done all this preparation. We get to Sacramento. I go in to the office of who I thought was the subcommittee chair, because he had been up until like that week, to say we're here, we're ready. He was an LA County representative. I've got LA County people, we're ready to go. And the staff said, oh, my bad, I should have called you. This person is no longer chair. And I said, okay, well, who's the new chair of the subcommittee? Then when I did the mental kind of calculation, there was no one representing LA County serving on that budget subcommittee. LA County is home to 1/3 of the state's kids. So we were walking into a situation where there was no one from LA County that would hear our advocacy message.
Wow.
And I sat there in the hearing and I just saw how it was going down. And I got angry because I realized that there was no one there with kind of the vision to understand how all of these services connect. Without childcare, I can't go to work. If I can't go to work, I can't provide for my family or pay for my housing. It's an intricate web of codependency.
Yep.
And if you take one of those core elements away, the house of cards comes crumbling down. And I literally sat there and got mad enough to decide that I had a perspective that those people didn't. I had a life experience. I had a career of service. I also had legislative experience. I'd worked for the legislature, and I felt that they were using a real sledgehammer approach. Now, there was a problem. The state was broke. This was during the Great Recession. But I felt that they were making decisions that were going to be too difficult to undo. And that a scalpel approach, just the way in which they could have been cutting services, making changes, that when the pendulum swung back, and it always does, there's always an economic recovery, that we would be able to hit the ground running more quickly to help rebuild these programs and help rebuild lives. And I got mad enough to decide to run for myself. And that's what I did. That's how it happened. And, it's interesting. Crystal Stairs helped me define my leadership, quite frankly. I think people think elected official, policymaker, politician, leader are all synonymous, and they're not. We just experienced, in my humble opinion, the highest elected office in the land, and he was not a leader. Our former president, he wasn't a leader. He held the office, but he wasn't a leader. And so Crystal Stairs gave me the space and opportunity and exposed me to theories of leadership, where I literally studied leadership. And, we had wonderful all-staff presentations where we heard from people who wrote about and studied theories of leadership. And it helped me begin to identify and define for myself what my own style of leadership was. I'd gone to job interviews my whole life. What's your style of leadership? Did you make it up? I don't know. I'm, collaborative. I'm, what does that mean really, right?
Yeah.
But Crystal Stairs taught me and exposed me and gave me the opportunity to define for myself my style of leadership. And my legislative colleagues always assumed that it was my legislative staff history that best prepared me to be a policymaker, and it was not. It was my leadership experience at Crystal Stairs, where I built teams and led them successfully, where I identified strategies and priorities and put in place the resources and the teams and the strategy to meet those goals.
Mm-hmm.
How I honed my communication skills, my persuasive speech giving skills, which were all things that frankly led to me being able to introduce 118 bills, and out of them have 90 be signed into law by 2 governors. I'm in the middle of the process now as a new supervisor of strategically building my team, working with a consultant who helped me do it at Crystal Stairs and in the legislature. Because I'm clear, I can't do this job alone. I can't represent 2 million people in the county alone. And to spend time on the front end to build a team that also forces me to stop and articulate what I'm looking for in a team, what our shared values must be as a team, and what our ultimate goals are. So there's alignment. It's nothing worth working for someone who holds you accountable for a work product that they've never really fully talked to you about their expectations. And so I worked very hard to do that on the front end, so people are clear about what it means to be a member of Team Mitchell. We have shared agreements and vision statements and goals and strategies on what we're going to do to create a second supervisorial district in LA County where all children and their families can thrive. That's leadership. And those are the skills I frankly learned in leading a nonprofit organization that were more relevant as transferable skills into my job as a policymaker, quite frankly, than having worked in the legislature and kind of knowing how a bill becomes a law and knowing how to take the back stairs in the Capitol to get from the 4th floor to the 6th floor.
Yeah. Well, I think it's really interesting. One of some of the themes and the feedbacks that we had received before was, and I'm glad that you touched upon it, is really just knowing what to do with anger. Like when you're angry at something or when you're agitated at something, and you don't just sit on it, don't just blow up. Like how do you massage that anger into action and then execute on it, but with eloquence. And again, I'm just saying this as an observer, as a leader, and Skid Row Housing Trust really tries to be a leader in its field and do the right things despite the circumstances. It's just like the eloquence that you lead through the tough spots, just like, getting angry at what we see and what we understand, and sometimes things don't go, like, to your point, you walk into an environment, you're like, okay, I'm with my advocates, I'm ready to go. And then the game changed, and how do you're still angry. Now you're a little more angry, and you still got to massage it and get it through. So I think that was just, again, a very, very articulate way of saying, well, this is what you do with that, and this is how you push forward.
And the anger is what got me to the decision.
Mm-hmm.
But then I had to do the work.
Yeah.
I was angry.
Yeah.
Decided to run, but then I had to figure out the game plan. And so that's when we stopped, and I called Emily's list and I called all the groups. I said, okay, I need a model. I am a single parent of a school-age child. Like, I know the why. Now I have to figure out the how. Like,
right.
How am I going to do this?
Mm-hmm.
And so I looked nationwide. I didn't know what else to do. I knew that my former boss wasn't the model. Diane Watson didn't have kids, single, never married. And her model was to be everywhere all the time. And I knew that I couldn't do that. I just literally could not do it the way she did it.
Right.
And so that, since that was my only frame of reference, and she was the elected official I worked for, I had to look for other models.
Yeah.
Well, that's when I got angry the second time, when the women's organizations across the country said, yeah, we can't quite really find anybody that fits that MO.
Yeah.
Some of them are, women of independent means, their children are older, they're married, so they have the support. They're like, yeah, we can't really find a model. Well, then I got mad again and said, this feels like it's by design to keep someone like me out of the game. And that's a problem, because my lived experience deserves to be in that room. And so I had to figure out my own model of how to make it work, of how to be in Sacramento Monday through Thursday and raise my son and, keep myself sane and my family whole.
Yeah.
And so anger was a motivation. Then I had to switch into strategy, game plan to figure it out.
Yeah. I was in a meeting, I think maybe a year, 2 years ago, and you were speaking, I think it was at the Weingart Center. And then there was another virtual meeting about 6 months ago that we were sitting on. And there was this, people were making comments on whatever you were commenting on. And I really don't remember what it was that you were commenting on, but they were commenting, on you as a leader. And I thought it was really interesting because they said, Holly Mitchell does not need to be a leader 24/7. She knows when to step back and allow her teams to lead, how to allow other people to influence a process. But if and when a leader is needed, there is no fear, or if there's fear, that fear is managed to step into the leadership. And that's why she's a leader, because we follow her not because we have to, but because we want to. And that was like 3 separate meetings, like a long time ago, 2 years ago, and then 6 months ago. I just wanted to share that with you because some people wanted me to share that with you also. It's just like, you inspire desire to be followed versus the mandatory to follow, so, and that, I think, just as you've been talking, you're articulating like why and how and who you join and how you use your emotions and where you use your lived experience. All lived experience is different. You're like, but I'm not represented there. So how do I get my voice there? Because my voice might be a little more statistically pervasive than perhaps in other people, right? So, yeah.
Exactly.
So,
That's
yeah.
very powerful. Thank you for sharing that with me. That's very powerful. When I was first elected to the assembly, John Perez was the speaker, and really did me a huge solid by selecting me to attend a leadership training institute for freshman legislators at the University of Virginia. And, again, Ryan was 10 when I was first elected. So figuring out how to peel away to be, it was hard enough balancing this act between Sacramento and LA. Now I'm going to go to Virginia for this training program for a week. And I'm so glad that I figured it out and went, because it was so profound for me personally. Lots of reading, lots of preparation, again, different theories on leadership, but helped me decide what I personally wanted, how I wanted to be thought of or kind of remembered, what I wanted the experience with me to be. And I made the decision that I wanted to inspire. And so, I remember coming back and sharing that with my team and saying, so for example, in speeches, when I'm speaking publicly, don't prepare remarks for me that regurgitates the organization's facts. If organization A invites me to speak, I don't want to open with, and you and your board of directors of 10 and your annual budget of X and da-da-da-da, they know that. They've invited me for a reason. So A, maybe let's ask them, well, why did you think of inviting Mitchell to come speak? And B, just understand that my desire is to um, leave people with something, a feeling, a decision about an action they're going to take. I want them to be inspired. And so that has been the goal, because I think inspired people will become people who take action.
Yeah.
And I need people to take action to help create a LA County where all families thrive.
Yeah.
I can't do it by myself as a policymaker. My team can't do it by ourselves as Team Mitchell. It's about partnerships.
Yeah.
And so thank you for sharing that with me, because that lets me know that I continue to meet my own personal goal.
Okay. Awesome. So talking about LA specifically and jumping a little bit to homelessness, just because of our audience around, homelessness, really interested in hearing your perspective, your thoughts, your goals, maybe some inspiring actions that we could be taking. But can you talk a little bit about, your homelessness plan and where you think LA needs to go on housing and homeless services? And what organization like ours what can we do to help support, facilitate, fire up that action, with you?
Right. Well, the reality is I'm onboarding, and I hate the fact that it's taking longer than I wanted to, but I'm onboarding in the middle of a public health and economic pandemic. I'm
Mhm.
onboarding literally into a new job at a time when I don't even get to meet in person with my colleagues. So
Yeah.
it's weird for me.
Yeah.
I read a room, I read body language, I give body language. That's kind of who I am. And so it's hard in this through technology to even begin to do that. So, it's taking me longer to get my sea legs. And
Yeah.
I'm just being very honest about that. I am being very strategic and thoughtful about how we assemble a team that will be a bit of a hybrid, where I was honored that there are several members of my predecessor's team who chose to stay. And we are incorporating some of my folks who came with me from the Senate, as well as new team members, and new team members who are also existing members of the county family, and some outsiders. You remember I came from the outside with a particular perspective, wanting to come into government to influence it. I see real value in that. And so to have this real hybrid model where it's
Yeah.
not all outsiders coming in trying to take over, that doesn't work, but a real hybrid approach where all of us are bringing our perspectives. And
Yeah.
I think that's important, because that's the way in which we can really push the envelope. And we want to think outside of what may be perceived as a historic box. And so I really want to talk about collaboration. I really want to use my acquired skill and expertise around budgeting and the state budget to make sure that we are capitalizing off of every state resource we possibly can to partner.
Yeah.
I am interested, and I think one of the values I was having a conversation last night with Sheila Kuehl, because all of us are being asked all the time, well, what is it like? What's the difference now that the board is all female? And first, I'm not completely sure yet, because we haven't even been in the same room together. But also, just as women leaders, women lead differently. We multitask. We tend to come to public office based on a concern around these social service issues. And so I think, the five of us are not going to be kind of monolithic in our thinking, but are really going to bring all of our perspectives to this problem, which is important. I think government sometimes gets itself caught in this trick bag of doing one thing at a time. We are only going to build shelters. We are only going to build permanent supportive housing. We are only going to do whatever. And the needs of our unhoused population don't support that one thing at one time thinking. We have to figure out how to do it all to meet their unique needs. And so that's what I'll be pushing. I am clear that a key element of our unhoused problem is our lack of housing and our lack of affordable housing. And so we're going to have to break out and get real creative and very courageous as we address the political hot potato of what we build, for whom, and where we build it. That's the three-legged stool that if we don't address all three of those legs, it gets complicated. So those are the conversations we're having.
Yeah.
I have staff. The staffing piece is gelling. In the next week or so, we should be full operational mode with senior deputies focusing on the unhoused and housing. We're kind of organizing our structure in work pods because, you know, the housing people can't just talk about housing without talking about transportation, without talking about health. My senior health deputy can't just talk about health without talking about these other issues. So we're creating a structure where we're really going to try to have cross conversations and not be stuck in silos.
Yeah. That is so awesome, you know, to hear just that kind of systems thinking approach that, you know, you're saying this kind of cross collaboration, because we often get asked at Skid Row Housing Trust, we often get asked, you know, how do we solve homelessness? You know, what should we do? When we said, well, kind of the same, very similar to you, is we got to bifurcate and say there's unhoused that has to be lifted out of homelessness, and then we have to stop slides of anyone coming into homelessness in the first place. Yeah.
Right. And yeah. I've been saying that all along. I think that's manifested in me carrying the bill around, you know, vouchers and stopping people from discriminating against source of income. That was a huge lift. Right. But, you know, when you look at every day that some level of government finds housing for 112 people, but 100 new people lose their housing. Right. That's basic math. That's not an equation. We will never get out. We will never make a dent if more water is coming into the boat than we can bail out. Yeah, exactly. And so keeping people where they are, that's got to be the strategy right now in COVID. And all the actions various levels of government are taking to stem the immediate tide of eviction. Yeah. But on the heels of that has to be, what do we do to keep that together? I am hearing the screams of desperation from my mom and pop property owners. I get it. Yeah. I am hearing the screams of desperation from the cancel the rent advocates. I hear it and get it. And so how do we prevent another housing crisis like I lived through in the legislature? As people in the community I represent talk about gentrification, how do we prevent gentrification where we could be in a position where, because we have frozen the rent, because we have canceled the rent, let's say, small mom and pop landlords can't make those mortgages. Who comes in and buys up that property? Yeah. And that could be the next wave that, you know, takes out South Los Angeles. And so it is a delicate balancing act that we have to figure out all the elements to support every piece of that equation. Yeah. Yeah, and again, it's just really refreshing to hear kind of those balances, you know, like last year, but before, like the middle of last year, there was this, and I'm very much generalizing, but you know, there was this thought of like, red thought was, let's give jobs and that'll solve homelessness. And then blue thought was, let's give homes and then jobs will come. And so we were caught in the middle, and we were saying, let's be purple and try to blend this together because they're interdependent of one another, you know, and we all want the same thing. Maybe the order we difference, you know, the differences in the order, but we want the same thing. For whatever reasons we want them. We want the same thing. So let's focus on that, you know, and that just, you again going back to kind of threading the understanding those perspectives, because sometimes people get, for whatever reason, emotionalism or not, get pretty dogmatic in their views versus like, okay, well, that's not going to move anything, you know. So it's very, you know, again, very excited, you know, to hear you just taking that, like, okay, I'm going to take a look, I'm going to connect the dots, I'm going to thread these needles, and I'm going to pull tight when the timing's right, you know, is very impressive. So we are very grateful for that. I appreciate you.
Yeah. On a this is a very specific question now, because this came up, you know, a couple times. LA Alliance for Human Rights sued the city and county in early March for failing to comprehensively address the desperate situation facing homeless people: hunger, crime, squalor, and specifically the coronavirus impact, you know, that has been horrible, but has also proven the points and theories, you know, of the past. Can you talk at all about this, you know, case, what your perspective is, or where it stands? And whatever you
Well,
can share, we appreciate it.
so I appreciate that, because as you just shared, it's current litigation. The county
Yeah.
is a party to it, so it makes it complicated in terms of what I can share.
Mhm.
However, it's a unique kind of lawsuit. It's been stayed, and I think what's important and what the opportunity that lies in it is for us to proactively think through. Okay, yeah, we got to do better. Everybody acknowledges that. We didn't have to be sued to understand we got a problem. You know, as my father would say,
Yeah.
Stevie Wonder sees we have a problem.
Right.
And so now, with the city and county both being sued, maybe this creates an opportunity for, I don't know, two levels of government to work together.
Yeah.
Imagine that. For us to really come together to talk about, you know, short-term, midterm, and longer-term solutions.
Hmm.
You know, Dr. Sharon, the director of county mental health, is famous for saying, you know, if there had been a fire, an earthquake, a tsunami, and 70,000 people were unhoused, it would be perceived as an emergency, and we
Yeah.
would roll in and come up with immediate Red Cross like,
Yeah.
FEMA like solutions. And so it wasn't a single event, it was a series of decades of oppression and a series of events, some of whom fueled by lawmakers, I might add, that led us to this scenario.
Right.
Um, and so why is our response not the same?
Hmm.
And he's got a point, and I agree with him. And so I think that through this lawsuit, we should be able to get to a place, even though it's currently stayed, where we're looking at multiple strategies, where multiple levels of government can come in. You know, Operation Room Key was an important element that also amplified for me some of the ugliness around supporting our unhoused. Because you know, we love to say, well, there's no money, there's no money. Well, guess what? We have some money, and we have a motivating factor that should have everybody wanting to come to the table to negotiate. And you know, the county had to file lawsuits and threaten a number of municipalities who were trying to block the Operation Room Key from coming into their cities. That's ridiculous.
Yeah.
That's ridiculous. So we now have the opportunity with potentially 100% FEMA funding to now do Operation Home Key. So everybody has got to come to the table, not just the city of LA, but all the other 87 cities that comprise LA County, to do all that we can to provide, to take advantage of this moment in time and these federal dollars. To create homes and to identify homes for people. You know, Operation Room Key and Operation Home Key for me was a win-win scenario. The small hotel operators that couldn't open because of COVID had a source of revenue. People were off the street immediately and had a place to stay. And now, as we're transitioning, let us buy these small motels and hotels and do the conversions. We know that that's a much more cost-effective way of building permanent housing. And just based on their physical layout and infrastructure, a great way to have access and space for the supportive services side of the permanent supportive housing kind of
Hmm.
equation to be on site. It's a win-win-win. So you're like, if we blow this opportunity, shame on all of us.
And you know, thank you for sharing all of that. You know, because again, tough issue, tough timing to answer it, but very, very appreciative that you shared that perspective. You know, and I know we're coming up on our time, so thank you for hanging in there. You know, just one more question, then we have, I think, a couple of Q&A
Okay.
just coming from the audience. You have accomplished a significant amount of firsts, you know, whether by design or purposeful or intentional, you know, and this is always kind of a very interesting question, but what do you hope your legacy to be? So when you're done with your firsts, you know, like what would you hope your legacy to be? And what are some of the things that you really would like to share with this audience, to share with us, you know, to help you do what it is that you want to do as it relates to more firsts and your legacy?
You know, I never thought of the legacy question, quite frankly, until very recently, because people are asking me the question. You know, first it was, Oh, you're coming up on 10 years in the legislature. After I won my current seat, I'm leaving there. What will you hope your legacy will be for those 10 years? I thought, huh. And it's interesting, people, I'm getting the legacy question a lot, and I hadn't thought about it. And I was on a Zoom a couple of weeks ago with other elected women, a very powerful, probably historic Zoom session. I was just happy to be in the room to bear witness. And I listened to all of them give their answers, and I realized that most of the audience of the Zoom were not elected women. And I thought, how, legacy is something we all have to think about, not just people who are elected. And so just what do you want your legacy to be, whether you're elected or not? And I thought about, the whole notion of courage and not being afraid. There were any number of people when I said I'd run for the assembly who said, oh, you shouldn't do that. And the guy that's running against you, he's A and B and C, and yeah, you run Crystal Stairs, and that's a wonderful organization, and you're very impressive. You do good work, but this, oh, okay. Ran for the Senate. Oh, well, you've got more time in the assembly. Why don't you let this guy? That's interesting, common theme. Why don't you let this guy who's termed out run for the Senate? So, well, I kind of have this perspective. This is my body of work. Let's weigh it against his body of work and figure out who's best for the Senate. I won. Then this seat came along, and my primary opponent had made it very clear for a year prior that he intended to run. And I think, and clearly I was the underdog. Many of the major institutions had lined up. Many of our friends and family in labor, the Democratic Party endorsed. And it really was this notion that, Holly, you're great and all, you do amazing work in the legislature. You're not termed out. Just stay where you are. He's termed out. He's got a heads up. He's going to outraise you, 4-1. Let's just let him do it. And so my legacy, I hope, is that people understand that I was never afraid. And I think if you want to be a change agent, and if we want to disrupt the status quo, and for me, the status quo has never been on my side. The status quo wasn't on the side of my foremothers and forefathers. The status quo has never been on the side of women or Black people. And so, it's about me disrupting the status quo to make it inclusive for people like me, for children in my community. And so to be a disruptor of the status quo, you can't be afraid.
Yeah.
And I think, I hope that my actions earn me that legacy.
Well, I want to thank you for all of this. You're always been inspiring. Your actions are inspiring. Your words are inspiring. Your leadership, whether you're, being this very powerful leader or whether you're being a servant leader, it's always influential and affecting. So on behalf of our residents, on behalf of our employees, on behalf of our board, on behalf of our organization, so grateful that you took the time out to talk to us today. We follow you, we support you, lean on us, whenever you need us to. We're your partner in all of this, and we're looking forward to the next 4, 5, 10 years of actually taking all that's happened in the last 5 years, doing something with it and moving it forward. So thank you very, very much. I appreciate this, and I'm going to turn this over to Jet because she has some questions, and we want to make sure we get those couple of questions before you have to leave. Thank you for hanging in there. I know we went a little bit over, but we appreciate it, and we'll talk to you soon.
I appreciate the forum that you've created. I appreciated your opening remarks, thanking your team members for not being afraid and having the courage to help manage through this crisis, and invite me back anytime. I'd be honored to share time with you.
Awesome. Thank you. And Jet, I'm going to turn it over to you so we can get the audience questions answered.
Thank you so much, Lee. And Supervisor Mitchell, thank you for being here with us. One of the first really great questions that we got after convening this forum came from Lily Sofiani on your staff at the Senate and now at the county. And
yes,
we were all just out of our minds excited that, Senator Holly Mitchell's staff member was following our burgeoning series. And so we know how present you and your teams are to the community, and it's been awesome to have you here.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. So we do have at least one question that I know of, and if anybody else has a question, please drop it in the chat. I'd like to go to Daniel Dart.
Hello, can you guys hear me?
Yes.
Hey, hello, how's it going? Thank you so much, first of all, for taking the time to speak to us. Very, very good information. I appreciate it. I was curious, I noticed that you recently at the Summit on Housing spoke with Matt Desmond, who wrote Evicted, and I'm reading that right now. And I was just wondering how that conversation may have informed your thinking about housing policy and what you kind of got from that.
Oh my God. Well, I had a little time pre the public forum with him, and I had real mixed emotions about his book. It was incredibly informative. I teased him. I said, I hadn't read footnotes in a book since you had to, like in college. And there was one line in the book that I'm like, why would you footnote that? He was talking about one of the kids he was interviewing, talking about the boyfriend of his older sister had, put her through the glass table. So I know what that means. They were fighting and he pushed her into a glass table. I'm like, why would you footnote that? So that was what my curiosity led me to the footnote. So the footnotes in the book are a powerful history lesson of housing policy. It's through the footnotes, it's just a powerful lesson. Some of the experiences in the people in the book and some of the behaviors of, quite frankly, the landlords, it was troubling to me. It was disappointing to hear the Black woman landlord who had been a school teacher, who, kind of got into this game, if you will, of buying properties. And there's a line in the book where she says, yeah, she's benefiting off of the bad luck of other people. That, hit me hard. But to get to your point, recognizing that there is that sometimes government plays a role in the systemic isms that keep people down. When he talked about the Milwaukee experience and the whole eviction process, I asked him a question during the interview. I said, do you think government plays a role? When we looked at the scenario in which law enforcement would charge the landlords if too many 911 calls came from their tenants. There were a couple of policies that government had put in place that further complicated and compromised the lives and livelihoods of poor people in that example. And it made me think about other ways in which government is not serving all the people equally or fairly. So I think the book was powerful. It's a great history lesson. It's a great relevant lesson now as we're looking at eviction moratoriums and what we're going to do next as government. The moratorium works now, but what comes next to continue to protect both tenants and landlords in an effort to not weight the equation unfairly, protecting one over the other. All those things.
Thank you so much. I appreciate that.
Thank you, Daniel, and thank you, Supervisor. And we don't have any remaining questions, so I think that we might be in a unique position where we can give you 9 minutes back for your day.
Oh, and I'll take it. It's so rare. Again, thank you. You're an organization that, I've spent time, I've toured your facilities. I value the work you do in this overall equation that all of us have to address. You are a perfect example of how private sector, public sector, everyone must come together to figure out and work our way through this conundrum of how we all find a space to live with honor and dignity. So thank you very much for today's invitation. I appreciate you, and I hope that you'll have me back.
Thank you so much for being here. We will look forward to connecting soon and hope that you can join us in our virtual building openings for 649 Lofts and floor 401. We're bringing our unhoused neighbors home right now.
Excellent. Excellent. I hope to. Thank you so much. Have a great afternoon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.